Welcome back to the Discipline Troublemakers podcast. I'm your host, Scott Shigori. Here on DT, we talk about scaling great tech companies and helping CEOs do this with greater ease and flow. Today, we're going to be talking with Tom Blair. Tom is the co-founder and CEO of iCLERK.ai. Founded in 2019, iCLERK provides secure and customized AI solutions for enterprises. Previously, Tom co-founded Performance Livestock Analytics, which was acquired by Zoetis, and ClearAg, an AI weather analytics platform acquired by DTN. He's also held senior roles at Trimble Navigation, Sybase before it was SAP, Autonomy Systems before it was HP, and Oracle, contributing significantly to mobile, telematics, AI, and database technologies. Today, we're going to be talking with Tom about the challenges and opportunities around scaling AI companies. Tom, thank you for carving out time to chat with us today, and welcome to the Discipline Troublemakers podcast.
Thank you for having me, Scott. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thank you. So obviously, I've provided a little bit of info in the intro there, but I guess maybe flesh out what you guys are working on and with what you're comfortable sharing, how you're doing that. What's your ideal audience, the key challenge, and a bit about your secret sauce for
All right. So iCLERK AI is an applied AI company or a vertical AI company that captures cognitive enterprise knowledge and builds these autonomous role-aware agents for our primary markets have been the financial sector, so both private and public companies, 501cs as well. Anyone that has frequent statutory reporting with critical business processes. Often you have these firms outsource or offshore that type of work, but it's always professional work that needs to be done by a venture analyst or a CPA. So these are we automate accounting processes, critical financial processes, things that need to be accurate and repeatable and provable, right? And so things like LP reporting or net asset value reporting or automating the creation of a schedule of investments from portfolio company inputs that come across your email. So you can think of it as truly cognitive processes that occur that comprise your business. These agents, like I said, they're repeatable and they're traceable. They use multiple types of models. You can think of an agent as a set of actions, and each action could be apply a different model. So you could have a deterministic model if you're doing numerical processing, for instance, or you could use different language models or other models based on cost or performance or even jurisdiction where you are in the world, right? The beauty of these, that I always refer to it as a change in epochs. I think I've been through a couple in my long career. I was early in the database industry, which affected every application in every sector in every country in the world. And I traveled a lot for that through the 80s and 90s. We went through the cloud and mobile epoch, which again, every system of record changed with a new architecture and new tools available. And you're seeing this again with these AI tools. The thing about agents is it is the tools. It is the use of these tools and the ability to comply and to use different models to adapt to custom workflows. So it's really a change. You're able to implement these very quickly. They leave the customer data in place, for instance. The integration is, these AI agents can act as an index, so you can point at all the data. And so the implementation is really quick, 100 man hours often. And so probably the most profound change in the industry that I've seen in 2025, just over the last couple of months, has been the willingness to engage. People have gotten over the fear hump and are starting to look at this mainly because of the economics of them. They're typically our pitch line is we replace 90% of the work for 10 cents on the dollar. Basically the users set the price, whatever, they're executing this work anyways. They're using CPAs at $400 an hour, or they're using IT staff to create reports, or venture analysts to collect portfolio data to put together an LP. the list goes on, and that's really mundane, repetitive work, but it's very critical. So these agents, you can effectively have 10 agents for the cost of one human. And so that lowers your bar of entry. If you just focus on a single agent that solves a single problem, people can get their head around that. They can start to see the value proposition and the time saved, and then start to see the other value that AI gives you is the ability to generate new things and to do discovery and one-off queries and such. So it's really an agent operating environment. It allows you to rapidly, that's what we do is we don't even charge for integration. We go in within a 1 quarter period, you can automate a workflow and pay for it at the end, right? It really changes how professional services are delivered. It's having a profound effect on that industry.
Yeah, no, and certainly we've all of us who have, even on a very simple or superficial level, can see what those changes are, as everyone in the industry or broader IT space looks at orchestration differently, looks at data differently, looks at the API functionality differently. There's all sorts of things, and I think what's helpful and both productive is that you don't have to do something super complex. You can pick a workflow or a process that is, as you said, mundane, standardized in some way, shape, or form, whatever that SOP happens to look like for company A or B, and then one step at a time, just relieve pressure from people's backs or whatever the team looks like. Because usually a lot of that work, not only is it cumbersome, but it takes an enormous amount of time, and most teams or many of them are stretched. So
our first customer had problems with retention. They were in Edmonton actually, and nobody wants to get their MBA and join a venture capital firm and then spend your time chasing down portfolio founders for their balance sheet to put together a Excel spreadsheet that generates an LP report. And that retention is what drove the first adopters of this. Actually, it wasn't the economics or the ease of use or the brilliance of it. It was basic, staffing problems.
Yeah, or just the pressure. It was what I could describe as a level 10 bleeding neck problem that somebody had, where it was just causing them an enormous amount of discomfort, and AI agents or whatever the solution happens to be can actually go ahead and solve that problem.
They're role based. You treat them just like as you would an employee, right? And so they don't have this autonomy, even though that all agents have this level of autonomous on them. They are role based, and if you have an agent serving up, a private wiki content for your knowledge base. Yeah. They might have more latitude on how they respond. But if you're generating an LP report, everything needs to be one quick traceable. You need to see, nobody believes in AI. They don't believe in the summaries. They don't believe in the numbers, right? They're non-deterministic by nature. And so when you drop, that's basically what iCLERK is you drop Turing type functionality that's traceable, auditable, repeatable, all with one click. You can always go back to the source. Onto a weather machine, an ensemble set of models that process concurrently depending on the task, right? So it's the melding of those deterministic, non-deterministic functions into an agent that can choose what to do at the appropriate time based on the data.
Yeah, and then insert a human for review or whatever
always
that process
in the
might
loop, right? For
be, even if it's 2 or 3 times or just once, or the expertise that a respective person might have. Yeah, because I think we can all appreciate the value of that for a variety of reasons. Yeah. What does you guys have been around since 2019. Obviously, you've been through COVID. A lot of things have changed, to say the least. What does here in 2025, we'll say 2026, the next 18 months, what does scale look like to you and the team now and going forward?
It's been a long road. I sold my last company April of 2020, right? Peak COVID. I got my degree in AI in 1991. I was working at Kodak in their digital imaging research lab, doing semantic image recognition on building an image database, a searchable, semantically searchable image database. Well, that's a good idea. 40 years later, but so we really built on ideas. I had in my career, I had done a couple things. I had worked at Autonomy, I think you mentioned in Cambridge in the UK.
Yep.
Did Bayesian inference, probability theory to do image classification and text classification. I was lucky enough to be part of the team that bought a company called Dejima out of Japan, and one of their customers was Stanford Research Institute, and they had a multi-agent system that would, at that time, do natural language processing. That's what they used it for. But it's the same type of multi-agent system. The Performance Livestock Analytics is a cow company, and in the commodity space, cows are complex objects. They're skinny cows, grain, fat cows, ethanol, and fuel. It's the intersection of multiple commodities. And so iCLERK originally started as a price discovery engine for complex commodities, where each agent could be an independent commodity, and they would interact to form other derivative complex financial objects. And so over that 1,000 days that we built and spoke to, I'm an old database guy. Yeah, I'm cross-sector. I spoke to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people across sector all over the world. And we evolved. One of the things that happened was the agentic workflows and agent nomenclature, the ability to describe what we were doing, caught up to us. And so it's been a perfect, merger of that. And through that process of learning and talking and seeing the technological change, even over the last 36 months, through listening to customers, we've uncovered two vectors of growth, right? Mm-hmm. And so market reach, we've now got sets of agents, again, little autonomous units of work, might be data collection, might be a K1 report generation. It could be a distributed inventory control, any unit of work that you're performing right now. What you find is that you can, the data collection, the processing, and the reporting are the common denominator across that. So you can start to adapt it to different sectors. So market reach is one of the vectors of growth. And so we started, our initial customers were venture capitalists, and now we have private equity firms and family offices and hedge funds and all kinds of private financial services. 501Cs, they have, they do fundraising and they do statutory reporting on a quarterly basis. Those types of processes we can automate. For public companies, there's 5,000 public companies under $1 billion in revenue in the U.S. So SMB market, which is our primary market. Mm-hmm. And so they spend between $100,000 and $300,000 a year just doing statutory reporting, 10Ks, 10Qs, proxy statements. You can automate all of that, right? And so that's what we've been doing, is just using the tools available through iCLERK agents to attack these different financial subsectors. The other thing that we found, the other vector of growth, is the operational leverage that we found. Every customer that we've engaged doesn't stop at one agent. They, like I said, you can have 10 for the price of one professional human. And so that's a very compelling value proposition. Once they understand that it's not scary and you can do it quickly and it does provide value, then they find three more, right? And so it's these are very durable applications and durable revenue. It's much like a database in that nobody ever just disintegrates a database, right? Mm-hmm. Larry Ellison is still one of the top 5 richest people in the world, right? Yeah. Sybase still runs 70% of all the financial transactions on Wall Street. And Sybase got acquired by SAP like 20 years ago, right? So it's like, they never go away. And so that's what's compelling about this. And is, two vector growth, hugely growing market.
Yeah, I just think, one of the interesting things that I observe around, the agent market, if I may call it that, is that you can just replace what is already known or replace the most painful points of it. However that is, once we get over the fear piece of it, that HAL 9000 is not showing up just quite yet, just to relieve that burden. And I think of it as somewhat of a paradox, because we always talk about technology in certain ways. It's just the emotional relief that somebody has, whether it is that report that they have to file, or it's any number of things that just end up being a burden. In terms of, and you've highlighted some of it, but I'd like to dig a little bit deeper into it if you're comfortable, which is that, you're solving an immediate problem for a team, person, and whatnot. You've described that very, very well. In terms of, I guess, uncovering kind of the deep intel that gives you, iCLERK, the decision superiority over competitors, what does that look like? Is it about proprietary signals within a team, or is it about, kind of painful to replicate feedback? Because there are all sorts of loops that one could engage in. But I guess for iCLERK itself and for you and your team, what does that look like?
One of those, the way we learn is basically is through operational telemetry, through really working with these customers. Mm-hmm. I'm not a subject matter expert in any of the sectors that I operate in, right? So I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a venture mm-hmm. capitalist, and so mm-hmm. we rely on the partner interaction. It truly is a discovery of where their pain is. That's the first question I ask them is, what don't you want to do and what are you spending the most hours on? And they mm-hmm. tell us what the problems are, right? And so that's been the most valuable one. If you pull on those threads, economically, these agents can attack the niche markets. So you look at like fund administration, that might be $1 billion market, maybe a $1.5 billion market. Yeah. I wouldn't necessarily want to build a company that just attacks that, auto grading for education or K1 generation for hedge funds. You don't want to build a whole company, but if in 100 hours I can build an agent that's repeatable and I can sell it to every partner in every LLC, right? And so that's how we've been learning what the market wants. The other advantage we have is that, like me, all of my investors and co-founders and partners are, people who I've worked with before and made money on my last companies, but mm-hmm. more importantly, they're in their 60s and really well experienced. I've got, they're old and have 40 years experience and, lots of contacts all over the world. One of my co-founders spent 20 years at Goldman Sachs running their global commodities. Another one spent 28 years at Bank of America as a quant, right? And so we have this deep institutional knowledge because we're not like the, 20-year-old start your company. I'm a 61-year-old man who's been doing this for 40 years. It's my fourth company. And so the ability to, just go through LinkedIn and talk to all 2,000 people that I know mm-hmm. is an advantage, right? So.
Oh yeah, no, I think, and that institutional knowledge just runs deep, usually within the financial space, whether it's on the asset management side, it's around the commodity side, it's, elsewhere, even just, iBankers and stuff. That stuff does matter. They like telling each other stories or having them, scars and all, about, whether it's the 4 days they spent on a deal and were not able to sleep to, particular market crashes and opportunities with a big score or, not a not so big score, but to be able to kind of come together and be able to go ahead and, share that you and your team have that and can, evangelize on behalf and understand them at a very deep level, I think just often resonates well, particularly if they are concerned about, again, I jokingly referred to it as HAL 9000, but if there is that fear barrier and you can punch through that with what is their biggest pain or set of pain points, and they're happy to share that, and all of a sudden the swords or other things come down and the trust level just spikes almost immediately, you've got people who are listening to you instantaneously like that, which is hugely powerful because most most selling processes just meet a lot of indifference or apathy, and that's not the case here. It sounds like with yourselves. Would that be a fair statement?
It's the implementation, which it feeds to what is the misconception of AI, and that it's almost perceived as a religion, right? Something you have to adopt, a change in reasoning style, and it's not that, and it is, and it also points to what we found to be really effective is, because you can implement them so quickly in a quarter, 75 man hours to 150 man hours or so.
Yep.
We do that, like I said, without touching their data or messing with their system. So if they have spreadsheets that can stay in place, if they have a CRM, it can stay there. And so the interaction to do a deployment is 1 hour per week. So we spend good quality time, maybe an hour and a half, once a week for the 6 or 8 week deployment. And through that time, that team is doing their work anyways, right? They have their quarterly report. They're going to hand crank it just like they're doing, regardless of whether or not I'm there with them. And through that process, at the end, you have an automated report that's fully now, traceable and clickable, and it's dynamic and it's awesome. Mm-hmm. And you have the hand cranked one, and they should, if they match, then the integration's done, right? They've already done their work. And so we can do that whole integration for no cost. And that's the difference, is that you build a partnership. It's no risk for them. And at the end, they can see the results. And so that's the operational leverage we found that allows us to get in the door. And, and that's all you need.
Yeah, no. Is most of it cloud-based, or is there a lot of on-prem? I know the financial space can be a very, if you will, diverse one in terms of what that hardware infrastructure looks like. Do you guys end up dealing with multi-tenancy and all the usual things, or does it tend to be one type?
It's truly custom. So the beauty of ensemble system like that is you're abstracted from the rapid technical change that takes place in AI, right? No company wants to deal with that. They want to control their costs. They don't want runaway reasoning costs. So we abstract all that. And with that comes the ability to you can run locally without a cloud connection. We had one insurance company in Germany that wanted to keep all their information within the borders. So you can have, you can go to that level. So it depends on cost, performance, or jurisdiction, but you can do whatever you want.
Yeah, no, I'm not surprised to hear that, but I know some have some very specific requirements or just wants for different, even internal cultural reasons. What do you think, it's a question I always like to ask because there's always an interesting answer, which is, what do you think is most misunderstood by the market today about what you and the team or the company do now?
I think it is that religious fervor that everyone thinks you need to adopt AI. Almost every conversation I have, especially with public companies, they've all been told now by either their boss or an AI committee that's been formed that they have to do something with AI. And, like I'm not a CPA, they're not AI specialists. So it's like, and bridging that gap has been difficult for people because they think holistically, they're not thinking at a atomic unit of work level. And so that's really one of the reasons that AI agents will have a profound effect on all industries is that it's one unit of work at a time, right? And with that comes a business process re-engineering that you can start to think through new ways to do processes for fractions of the cost of doing it now.
Yeah. I mean, I even think of the work that I do, which is relatively recent since I left my corporate role. It has changed in a number of ways as I have utilized first, just the simple, log in, play with ChatGPT, play with Grok, to then moving on to browser-based systems, to going ahead to doing something else. And I haven't had to change a great deal I've just been able to utilize and do things much more quickly, or just again, leverage the platforms in a way that I hadn't been able to do as efficiently. So I use chat and the other platforms as a Socratic teacher for things that I'm not either as knowledgeable about or want to prepare in some way. I could do that before, but it would be a much more arduous task, and it just gets me that much more quickly down the road to ask better questions and to understand something at a deeper level, to then go on my own and do other stuff. And I think that's, just
I run a whole company with just a bunch of engineers, distributed engineers, no employees.
Yeah, no, it is quite remarkable to see, and we've only really scratched the surface of what is possible, and that it, as a whole, will be, I think, very beneficial for all of us if we adopt it and think about it in compelling ways. Yeah. Well, why don't we go ahead and take a short break, and we will be right back. Purple Finch Group helps technology CEOs innovating at the edge of chaos create operational fitness across their technology stack and team of talent. Achieving significant and measurable scale, selling your story, and finding time to think and plan can feel like a bridge too far. So if you're a CEO whose company has found product market fit, but is struggling, or you're a CEO whose company is looking to accelerate existing momentum, we can help with proven blueprints for optimal scale. Shifting from incremental addition to exponential multiplication can be absolutely achieved with less effort and stress. To get in touch, I can be reached at Scott with 2 T's at purplefinchgroup.com. Now, back to the interview. Well, we are back with Tom Blair from iCLERK. And let's go ahead, Tom, and shift gears just ever so slightly. What type of work, the work that you do now, gives you joy and energy as a CEO?
Yeah, during the break, I was telling you that I have just a joyous life right now. I'm, later in life, my kids are grown, and I really get to fulfill these sets of ideas that have grown for a long time. So it's really fulfilling an intellectual curiosity and, fighting boredom and all the things that come in your 60s, right? And, but there's other things about starting companies that, if you ignore the staring into the darkness in the abyss every Monday morning, things like that, there's real joy in, I work around a lot of students. When you're a poor young startup, you hire a lot of students. I've always done that. I also hire engineers that live in northern cold places because it's dark most of the year. They work more. It's awesome. They're cheaper usually. So I've got all these philosophies. So I've got this band of merry people across 10 different countries that have, over the last 1,000 days, we've formed this great community. There's just brilliant folks, everywhere from Rotterdam to Edmonton, right? In the country of Georgia and literally all over the world. And we operate through we dog food our own technology. We have agents that record every meeting and transcribe it and do it by role. And so you can time shift. I don't need to attend my engineering meetings. I can, again, time shift it, and the engineers act different when I'm around. So I don't, I'm not around, and then I can see what they're doing. Obviously all the marketing and the sales have been Kevin Baconing it through life, just on connections and word of mouth. And it's a new way to run a company. I've been a Section 16 officer at a NASDAQ company, and I've run, and I've had hundreds of people working for me. And this is different, and it's a different time to build a business. And I've never been more inspired, including when I was doing research at Kodak in my 20s, and it was just like the perfect world. And so I am just inspired. It's fantastic. I get to help young people and watch them grow, and they're brilliant and they're naturally adapted to these tools. Yeah. I get to speak with people cross sector, and always learn every single day. I'm learning all kinds of things that I had no idea, It's like walking through the forest. You think you're alone, and you pull over a rock, and there's like 1,000 ants there, a whole colony that you didn't even know about, right? I feel like that every day of my life, right? And that's the beauty. That's the essence of what I do. I control my own time. I'm pursuing my intellectual, what's haunted me for 4 decades since I went to school in the 80s, So, I encourage everyone to start businesses, go full risk on in their 60s. No, don't do that.
Yeah, well, when you look at the stats, I mean, obviously we see 20-year-olds getting lionized for things, hell, teenagers for the same thing.
See, I'm not looking for the lionization at this point. It's a different goal set, right?
Yeah. Yeah, but when you look at the stats, there are lots and lots of firms that we all know and utilize, or again, consume their products, whatever it happens to be, that have actually been founded by people in their 40s, their 50s, some of them in their 60s. And all the co-founders were in those age groups and stuff. So it is not just a young person's game that we perceive it to be. And then when you look globally, usually, certainly in Asian cultures, that age, being older, shall we say, is perceived as being enormously valuable too, as opposed to our youth culture here in the U.S. in particular, in the West in general. So
it's much easier to do when you don't have kids around.
Yeah,
I don't care what they say.
Yeah, no, that is fair. Yep. What, looking ahead for you and the team? We've covered it partially. What are you most excited about over the next 18 months or so?
Humans are bad at exponentials, right? We can't see the future. We don't understand. In my career, the internet came along and gave us all this data, and just Moore's law over my career is 1,000,000 times, and so I look back to where it was then and doing like image processing, something that you can, we were doing, I think 16 pixels at a time across 4K by 6K images on a Spark station.
I remember that.
Yep. Yeah. And now finally you can, the original, what Kodak sent me to school for was how do you find a picture of a boy in a blue boat from 5 million images. They just purchased a photo stock agency. So we were building an image database, an object-oriented image database with semantic image recognition using neural networks. Great idea, 40 years too early, right? And so even though I know that it's happening, and I cannot look out even 3 years into the future and look at what impact it will have to enterprises, because the AI scaling laws are I've got the numbers here. It's like it's growing between 4 and 40 times per year. Moore's law was 2 years every 18 months, and this
it was every 18 months.
4 to 40 times per year of inference improvement, and so I can't even. So I'm trying to, so far our architecture has done well with the advent of LLMs. I mean, I had natural language PhDs on staff when LLMs, dropped, and it was like, oh, good, thanks. And so how do you continue to keep up with the technology when humans don't change? Technology is like changing 4 to 40 times per year now, and so we're operating in that gap between the static humans that don't want to give up their spreadsheets. There's 750 million. You're going from 30 million programmers, 750 million spreadsheet users to billions of language users, right? And so somehow you got to get from like my mom to, over here, right? And that's kind of where these agents come in. So I can't see the future. No one can. My advisor in grad school told me, don't bet your career on neural networks, right? He didn't win the Nobel. He's not Geoffrey Hinton, right? So I don't know what to say. I'm just trying to, one task at a time. That's all I can do. That's what I like about it. It's just like one step at a time. And that'll end us up somewhere. I don't know where in 36 months, but it'll be interesting.
Yeah, no, I think so too. It's just, taking that small action, whatever it happens to be, I think is the most important step. And while it's a bit of a cliche, it doesn't have to be perfect as long as it's good. It's a bit like, a fitness journey. If, one wanted one where if you get a little bit better every day, or maybe it's every week, it doesn't have to be some, leap over the huge puddle. But go ahead and do something, and then find out where you are, and calibrate on it, and then calibrate on it. See what works with whatever a team wanted you to build, then as they understand it and think, oh, well, we could do this. John and his team need this, but Susan and his team need this. Could we implement that? And the answer, of course, was going to be yes. You could go ahead and do that. So I think it's not only an exciting time, even though some will focus on the fear factor, but I think the next, you and I have been around a while. I'm going to be turning 58 next week. I just think the next 10 years is going to be really very exciting. I mean, it's going to be genuinely transformative, and I know we say that in tech all the time. But I do think that there's just going to be, it will look very, very different from even the cycles that we've seen. You've mentioned the internet. We could talk about cloud. We could go for mobile. We could do the conventional journey there. But it's, I think, like you say, whether it's 4 or 40 times per year, that there is going to be some really quite miraculous stuff. We'll look back,
it's going to change
at 70 and say, in healthcare or in a number of areas, just, wow, that was accelerative, and how much more accelerative it is and will remain. It's just not going to, that accelerative curve, if you will, I think, continue for a long time, which is exciting.
It's increasing.
Yes, it is. Yeah, which is crazy to think. I mean, conventionally with the
incomprehensible.
Yep.
Even though that's all I do. I study this. It's a passion, and it's incomprehensible.
Yeah. No, I think, which is what makes it exciting. Where if someone like yourself, who actually has started with it since the early '90s and been thinking about it beforehand, and been in the space for its good and bad points for 4 decades now. And you're more excited than ever, and you can't predict the future,
and it's still
you don't
magic
know what's
to me.
It's still very exciting. That I think says just so much about what is essentially the potential. Yeah. I guess this is maybe the final question here as we wrap up. How has being CEO of the company, if you will, transformed you? And I know you've been CEO of several companies, you've sold them, so you've been through the rodeo many times now. This is number 4. Either as a whole or with iCLERK, what do you think has transformed you the most?
I touched on it before. This has been a different ride for me, because the technology is really different, and I can do things that I couldn't do with a dozen or 2 people before, and so it's been a combination of, the nice thing about running a startup is that you really do get to control your time. And that's a very powerful thing. If you can get to a point in your life or whatever it is where you really do control the bulk of your time, it's a path to happiness. And, I always look at life as a happiness curve, where you're really happy when you're young, and then you're, fighting life and having kids and jobs and get fired and moving around and all that stuff. And then you get back and your kids go away and you're happy again. And that's kind of where I am in that happy curve. And that combined with doing a startup that keeps my brain going, and I feel like I'm contributing back by helping people and actually doing good. So it's bridging that gap between idea and execution. You feel like you're actually creating something. You can see an end result that's tangible. It's a win-win type of technology where the customer gets good value, and it's just exceedingly fun to learn about these tools continuously. It's just amazing. So
Yeah, no, that's cool. I always think I say this only half jokingly because it is absolutely true, and you've highlighted it. As I said, they ask me sometimes what's great about AI or AI agents. I said everyone gets a dopamine hit much more quickly than they ever would have, a decade ago or more. Where some projects, I'm sure we've both been on projects that lasted months, and you didn't know whether they were actually going to pan out or not, or what the outcome was going to be. Were we going to achieve the ROI? And here, everyone, we it's all compressed, and we end up dealing with the fear right away. We then move on to actually the work itself and the implementation, and then you get to see the results pretty quickly and then iterate on it with very little discomfort. And I think once you get over that initial fear, a client or a prospect, all of a sudden everything just starts to flow because all of us know, or all of the team members know what the why is. And then we just simply move forward. We know who the owners are, and it gets solved that much more quickly, which is what most humans want. Is they want the solution very, very quickly. They want to lose 10 pounds in 2 days. They want to achieve that some more, marital bliss in some short period of time, whatever it happens to be. There's, AI, at least as a solution, can actually truly do that, even if it's a small step that becomes a set of bigger steps. So
agents take that immediate gratification down to one step at a time, and that's that's something that we can all get our heads around.
That's great. As the final question here, how would you like people, those listening, those who will see this on YouTube, how would you like people to get in touch with you?
Sure. I'm at, my email is tom@iclerk.ai. It's iCLERK.ai. And you can go to our website, check it out. I'm always happy to talk to you. We're in a period of discovery with these technologies. All of us are, right? It's a partnership. And so it's a fun way to learn. It really is. So, please feel free to reach out.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Tom, thank you very much for carving out time to talk with us today on the Disciplined Troublemakers podcast. It's been a great chat. Always a wonderful opportunity to learn new stuff that I didn't know about before, a new angle and things. And to all of you watching and listening out there, we will be back with another episode very soon. Cheers.
Thank you, Scott.
Yep. Thank you for tuning into the Disciplined Troublemakers podcast, and we hope you found the episode valuable. If you did, please subscribe to the Disciplined Troublemakers podcast on your favorite platform and leave a review. Putting this podcast together is a group effort, so I'd like to provide a shout out to Heartcast Media and their team for all of the assistance they provide with each episode. If you want to get in touch with me directly, I can be reached at Scott with 2 T's at purplefinchgroup.com. Purple Finch Group is the sponsor of this podcast. We have another podcast episode out very shortly. Stay tuned.